I'm trying to save you money here. If you already own something like, question whether you need to buy other plugins. Oh. Hello everyone, welcome to Audio Tea Time. This is going to be a longish video, I'd imagine. Oh, I'm spilling boiling tea all over me. Ow. That wasn't intended, but I'll probably leave it in. I literally just spilled boiling tea all over my leg. Well, with an intro like that, which I'm just going to leave, welcome. This video is all about plugins. It's my last video of 2025. I've changed my workflow loads this year because I've built all of this that I've got in the background, my studio, loads of analog stuff. So there's loads of plugins that I should really not stir while I'm talking because the microphone's there. Yeah, there's loads of plugins that I used to use all the time. And then there's loads of stuff that I just don't use anymore. And there's stuff that I have started to use. And there's stuff that I wanted to like and I hated. So I'm just going to list them all out and basically tell you what I'm still using, what I no longer use, what I want to use and try, what I tried and I hated, and then a few guilty pleasures as well, things that I wouldn't usually want to admit to liking, but I do. So yeah, welcome to Audio Tea Time. Bit of a strange intro, but you can't write these things, so you know, I'm just going to leave it in. Right, a little bit more milk in that, I think. It's not good enough having a cup of tea. I'd have a pot of tea. Right, let me get my phone out and I'll see what I had on my list. So these are all the plugins that I've used basically since I've been here, or sort of about April, May this year or something like that, because I changed my workflow from, I mean, I had some analog gear and I still had the desks at my old place, but I've got a lot more stuff here, so my workflow's massively changed. And the first plugin that I'm going to talk about comes with the Softube controllers, and it's the Softube Console 1 plugin. And that nowadays, now I'm using that stuff, that is on every track that I have in a session, and I'll show you it now. It's not the easiest plugin in the world to actually use as a plugin. You kind of, I mean, not that you have to, but it's a lot easier when you use it with the controller. But it's got a lot of really good stuff built in. I haven't bought any of the add-ons for it. Some of my UAD plugins work in it, but I just use it as it came, and it's got the tape filter, the tape section where you can kind of drive it like it's got a tape saturation on it. That sounds really good on it. Got the high and the low cut. You can change the slopes. You know, you got all the 12, 18, 24, 48 dB, and you got 6 dB per octave as well. So you got, you know, high cut, low cut going on, all sort of standard channel strip stuff. But it's just all in one plugin, and it's very, very useful. I like the pan, I like the width that's built into it. I quite often use the width control in that. Also the punch and the sustain, so you got kind of transient shaper with the punch and the sustain. I use that quite a lot. The EQs are fabulous. We got the modern equalizer and the vintage equalizer. I kind of use the modern equalizer to, you know, do surgical stuff. If I'm going to be sort of cutting out a tiny little ring or something like that, I'd use the modern for that. And then the vintage equalizer is a lot more sort of broad strokes EQ, so I would try and get it somewhere close to the ballpark with the vintage EQ in this, and then use the modern EQ to just sort of like tweak details and stuff like that. But I found this really useful, really usable. It's just, you know, I haven't really reached for many other EQ plugins because I can just do most of what I want to do in this. I don't use the compressors in it very much because I have a multitude of outboard compressors that I either reprint with or I use in real time when I'm mixing. Not to say that they're not good, but I found when you kind of push them quite hard, it's not as good as my outboard stuff. So maybe sort of if I've compressed something and reprinted it and then I just want to add a touch more, just take a transient off or something like that, I'll use those compressors. What I will do is, because the Softube plugin can load in some other plugins, not all of the plugins I use, but it can load in some of the UAD plugins. So I do use the UAD 2A a fair amount in that, and also the UAD 76. So if I'm going to do that, I don't necessarily always use the Softube stuff, but although the Bus Compressor in there is really quite nice. And then right at the end of the plugin here, we've got the drive section here where you can kind of add drive, add character. I'm not really sure what that does in harmonic terms. I don't use it that much, but when I have used it, you know, just to touch on, it's kind of worked, and it sounded really good. But because I've got the controllers, I'm using that on every channel. So that gives me a whole load of channel strip stuff, which will come up later in the video, why I'm not using certain other plugins. But yeah, that's my kind of #1 plugin of the year. Because it's used on everything and because I got the controller, I'm bound to use it probably more than other plugins, and I do find it incredibly functional. It sounds really good. So that's my first one. Let's look for the second one. Oh, that's a good cup of tea. Barry's tea, of course. I want to thank the people that have sent me Barry's tea, because since the end of September, I think I've had 17 boxes of Barry's tea given to me, and 2 sacks of 400 or 500 bags that have been either sent to my house, because people find out where I live by looking up on the internet, which, you know, when I put it in context, I kind of don't mind, but I have found that a little bit weird sometimes when I get sent things by people I don't know and they found my address somehow on the internet. And even though they're sending me Barry's tea, which is nice, it is a little bit strange, but thank you nonetheless. But yeah, I've had 17 boxes of Barry's tea and 2 big sacks of Barry's tea since the end of September, which is stunning. I'm not going to run out of tea, so thank you to everyone that's given me tea this year. Okay, so the next one's going to be SmartEQ. Okay, and SmartEQ 4. And this is just a really easy plugin to use. If I'm trying to do something quick, I don't use it on all my mixes, but I do use it for video, for like this. So I will just run SmartEQ over the mic and train it on the speech setting. Or if I'm just trying to knock something together really quick, let's say, you know, I've got a video that I want to put out, and I've got a drum stem, and I've got a guitar stem, and I've got a bass stem, and I've kind of got to mix it in DaVinci Resolve, and I'm just doing something really quick. Whacking on SmartEQ can be really good. And also it's almost like blind fixes. I've had situations where we like live stream a gig, and I don't know what the sound's going to be like, and I put SmartEQ and some other things over the kind of the stream where I've got front of house and ambience kind of mixed together, and I sort of check them at sound check, and then just let that change the EQ shape depending on the program dependent settings or whatever, and it works really well, and I found it a really useful plugin. And sometimes if I need to quickly run a load of vocals, let's say, through my Blueys, and before I'm starting a mix, I've got someone sent me a load of vocals, I sometimes just put SmartEQ over all of them to get the EQ kind of somewhere in the ballpark without having to think about it. It's like having an assistant in your studio. And then I'll run them back out through the Blueys and record them back and forget I ever used SmartEQ. And then I've got a nice sounding, sort of decently compressed vocal that I've reprinted. And then I'll EQ to taste and in context of the mix from there. But SmartEQ just kind of gets you to places you want to be very, very quickly. And I like the fact that I'm going to just play a bit of these drums in here and change it to drum set. That's very American. We'd say drum kit over here, but yeah, I'm just going to play a bit of these drums. But it very quickly, you know, can get a result. So it's kind of said that this EQ shape is what it thinks should be for a drum kit, and you can dial in a bit more or invert it so you boost all the stuff that it wants to cut and vice versa. But you can just kind of click, create a new, you know, use the mouse wheel to change the cue and create a new band, and you got all the different band types. You know, if you want to do something strange, just double click, get rid of it. It's a very usable, intuitive EQ. I don't particularly like the adaptive setting too much. I have used it every now and again, particularly if, like I said, with the live stream and it being unattended, I did dial a bit of that in. But most of the time I'll just put something in, smooth it out a bit, you know, dial in a little bit, and that will be a kind of a safe way to kind of reprint a vocal without worrying too much about the context in the mix. I like SmartEQ. I know it's got so many more features where you can add stuff to groups, and then you'd have your drums and you have your bass and your guitars, and you could sort of put it over all the buses and then group them and say what you want at the front and the back, and it will change the EQ so they don't all conflict with each other. But to me, that's part of the art of mixing and the magic of, I want to make those decisions. I don't want the plugin to do that. But every now and again, if you're running into a problem or you got something quick you need to do and you're just not finding it, this can be helpful. So I've used that quite a bit and very much like it, and it's very much part of my workflow, more so in the video side of stuff, but well worth mentioning. So that's my second plugin. Oh, I need to speed this up a bit, otherwise we're going to be here all day. Okay, CLA EQ. This was a new find for me, and I find this very interesting. This certainly isn't something that I would use in every session, almost no sessions, but actually yesterday I was using it with some pink noise. I basically had pink noise channel sent to another channel, and then they were polarity flipped, so they were out of phase with each other, so it was basically just silence. And then I used this plugin on one of the channels to kind of dial in notes from a scale, and it was really nice. And I had the automation basically changing the key, changing the chords. So basically you can detect a key for the song or set a key for the song. So if I wanted to do C major, and this basically will boost frequencies that are in the scale and cut frequencies that are out of the scale. And you know, you've got a few different bands of this, and you've got a normal high and low shelf as well within the EQ, but I don't really use any of that. Usually I just get a band and find something where it might be a bit harsh in the top end and cut out those frequencies. Or if I want to make something sound a little bit sort of robotic, which I've done on a song recently, I kind of boosted the frequencies that were in key, cut the frequencies that were out of key, so it sounded almost sort of like resonant in those frequencies. It sounded quite strange. And another thing I've done is just automate sweeping across the frequencies that are in the key, and that can sound really nice. So it's a creative tool, and every now and again it solves problems, but I use it more in sort of writing and creating soundscapes, and almost like creating instruments out of noise and other such things. So it's really interesting plugin, and I'm really glad I got it, because I was actually attempting to write something that did that, and then I thought, well, before I do that, I'll check and see whether someone's already done it, and they had. So yeah, that's a good plugin. Right, the next is the UAD Pultec. So yeah, the UAD Pultec plugin, I really like this one as a Pultec plugin. I've also used the IK one, and I've used the Waves one in the past. I don't know why I've ended up using the UAD one. I think it's probably because I can use it within the Softube controller. So I started using it in there because the Softube controller plugin can actually load certain other plugins. They're pretty compatible with a lot of UAD stuff. I love this on guitars. I used to use the Waves and the IK one, and then I used this. It's great. You boost a bit of guitars at the low end and then use the attenuate as well, and it creates some strange curves. I'm sure everyone out there knows the Pultec push-pull stuff and what it does. I've got videos going back years on my channel talking about that, probably doing it with Waves Pultec style plugins. But this one, I don't know, I think I just ended up using that with the Softube controller, and then actually using it in the Softube controller was a bit of a pain in the arse. So I ended up just, if I wanted it, just loading it on and using the GUI that it gives you, and it works perfectly well. And yeah, I've never felt the need to go back to the IK one or the Waves one. So that is very much still in my workflow. Okay, so the next one's a different kind of EQ plugin. This is the Voxengo Curve EQ. And this is such a useful tool, and I actually find myself using this more and more and more, sometimes to just capture the EQ shapes of bits of gear. So for example, if I've reprinted a load of stuff and then I've got a load of backing vocals and I can't be bothered to reprint all the backing vocals, I'm just going to use in the box compressors and EQ. But I like the EQ that I've got. It was the same mic, same singer, let's say. I like the EQ that I've got on the outboard. Sometimes I use this. I'll I'll put an impulse spike through this and record the kind of the EQ and compare it to without, and then you can match. In fact, let me show you how I do that. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm going to go out to UV EQ. So let me turn them on. So I've dialed in that UV EQ and using a hardware insert. Let's say I want to capture that EQ, right? So if I just want it for recall, I can use the EQ Curve Analyser, which I sometimes use. And this is a really useful plugin because it will tell me what the UV EQ is doing. And then I could freeze that, for example. Yeah, and if I want to recall that EQ, you can see I've kind of recorded the shape. So I put that on channels where I'm using external EQ so I can freeze what I'm doing. But let's say I want to copy that EQ and have a digital version of it, right? Well, let me move the Curve EQ in between the EQ Curve Analysers. And if I change some settings on here, this isn't very well prepared, is it? Hang on. So if I just go to the center, so we can see the EQ shape coming through on there. I'm going to turn up the resolution to 8192. So then I can basically just grab that, and then I can turn off the UV EQ. Wait for that to change, and I can also take that and I can apply that to that. So that's the EQ shape from my UV EQ. It's just really easy for matching EQ curves from one source to another. And also just as an analyzer plugin, just to have it on to see what you're doing. Sometimes I will compare my final song. They've got a setting in here called beige noise. So you can actually predefined ones there. You can go to beige noise there, and basically that gives you sort of a flat across the board, meant to represent somewhat the human ear. I prefer it to pink noise when I'm doing that. And sometimes, you know, if there's something sticking out, if I'm doing a mix and it's clear that I've got way too much, like 100 hertz, you know, 6 dB is 100 hertz, way more than the rest of the frequency spectrum, you know, you can kind of iron out, take a rolling pin to your master EQ by sort of looking and using this as an analyzer. But yeah, and sort of matching external EQs and matching other things. If you've got a guitar sound where someone's played something and you're setting up on another day and you want something similar, you can get, yeah, I could play the same thing that was played before and compare the EQs between them. And I've just found this a really useful tool, and it comes built into Cubase, but you can buy it as a standalone plugin. So I kind of did two there. I used this EQ Curve Analyzer, which I love for being able to recall my analog EQs and levels as well. You can use it to, because the graph moves up and down, so I can see where my fader was and what EQ I had on it very easily with that. But the Curve EQ will actually then, there are other solutions that do this, but I really enjoy the fact that you can have three curves as well, so you can kind of EQ three different EQ stages, and you can grab these and kind of do what you want with them if you want to do something wacky or whatever. I mean, and you can also bring in the whole curve, kind of turn it all down, dial it up, dial it back, whatever you want to do. So yeah, this is a really, really useful plugin. So if you don't own that, then get it. And Spam, which is the analyzer, I think is just free to download as well. So if you want a good analyzer, then that is the one to use. Right, what's next on my list? EQ73 by IK Multimedia. I really like this if I'm doing in the box stuff. This is kind of as close as I get to channel strip plugins other than the Softube stuff these days. I really like this one. I love when you kind of put it into mic, turn up, get a bit of saturation on it, and then the EQ's usable. I've got to say, I also like their 81 because you've got an extra band of EQ. Obviously, these are Neve clones, so to speak. I think clones is the right word. Neve models, I think that's a better word. The 81 gives you more EQ, but I prefer the saturation sound of the 73. And usually, you know, with the bottom and the middle and the top on this, again, it's broad shape sort of shaping. It's not detailed stuff where I'd be using a different plugin to do that. But yeah, if I'm doing a load of stuff in the box on tour, then I still use this. If I'm at home doing stuff here, I don't use that as much because I'll have probably reprinted stuff via outboard. So the quality that I'm getting out of this, I'll have been getting out of my outboard gear. But I still do use that. I've used that quite a bit this year, and the 81. The 432, the IK Multimedia Mastering EQ, I find myself using this more and more. My understanding is each band is parallel. I don't find myself using much more than 1 or maybe half a dB boost or cut in any one frequency range, but it does something in the mastering that is, if I'm sort of trying to do a quick master on a track, particularly sort of just quick stuff where I want to dial in something to ear and go listen in the car or something like that. I find this plugin's just nice. It's I hate using words like it sounds musical, but it does. It's everything's very pleasing on the ear with it in a way that I'm sure I could do it with a different plugin and broad strokes and whatever. But there's something simplistic about this. Again, it's the user interface. It just is very easy to use. So I still use that one quite a bit. So here's a funny one that I'm sure a lot of people would have a go at me for using, but it's the graphic EQ, the classic graphic EQ by Waves. And the reason I use this is because live we've got some graphic EQs in our rigs, and we've got some digital graphics built into desks which operate very similar to this, and you can adjust the Q control here. So I can kind of somewhat match it to what we're doing live. And if I take a multi-track and I think, oh, I need to pull some frequencies out of a certain guitar sound or whatever, I can kind of do it on this EQ and then go to my live rig and notch out the same. So I end up using this more kind of analyze things, and also other people I know who aren't as into audio engineering as I am, will quite often, if I send them a mix of something, they've got some sort of graphic EQ plugin. Maybe they'll have the Waves one, maybe they'll have a different one, maybe they'll be listening on a I know a friend of mine who listens, and he listens to everything. He goes via his Behringer X32, and he's got a 31 graphic on that, and he'll sit there and go, oh, I like it, but the guitars were a bit harsh in that area, and he'll dial out a frequency, and then he'll come back to me. And sometimes just putting on this plugin and dialing out pretty much exactly what was said solves the problem. And I don't really care whether it's, you know, the right way or whatever. You know, a lot of people are very funny about graphic EQs, but I know many guitarists that use graphic EQs, programmable graphic EQs in their live rigs to kind of shape sound, so different patches will have different EQs, and they work great. And because of that, I end up using one in software quite a bit when I'm listening to songs, and then go and copy that in my rig. So this is the last kind of EQ plugin that I use. Now, I've used it quite a bit this year, but I don't use it that often in mixes. When I do use it in mixes, let me find the preset. Here we go. So here's my pseudo stereo preset, where every band you can see, it's like the first band is down on one side and up on the other. And then you can dial the Q to basically make it more or less subtle. And you can also change between sort of like 12 dB, 6 dB range on it. And sometimes I've dialed in a bit of this to give a pseudo stereo. And obviously that completely collapses back to perfect mono again, because what you're doing on one side is equal and opposite in the other side. So if you've got a mono acoustic guitar and you dial in a little bit of this, so maybe it's just like 1 dB of changes or something across the left and the right, you know, you get a bit of a pseudo stereo, which will collapse perfectly back to mono. So that's the only scenario I use this for mixing. And there's probably another plugin that people would consider better, because I know everyone hates waves, but I've had this for years and I know it, and the preset's there, and then it works. So I keep using that. So that's a fairly standard sort of plugin. I think that covers most of the EQs that I use. But realistically, all of those ones come in a little bit here or there, with the exception of the Softube plugin, which just covers everything. Right, so when it comes to, in fact, I'm going to do some more tea before we go on to the next section. More tea. So I brought the pot in for. Let's try not to spill it on myself this time. For the ASMR, is it ASMR? For the ASMR people, this is... I'll put this right by the microphone, which is an OC818. When Bernd from Austrian Audio came down to see one of my gigs this year and brought me these two OC818 microphones, he did not think that I'd be using it to capture the sound of making tea. Or pouring tea, should I say. Let's move on. What's next on my list? Okay, bass. We all love bass. Tight bottom end, flappy bottom end, loads of sub and all this stuff that people love to talk about with the bottom end. And there's only two plugins that I really use to either control or add bass or remove it, or however you want to think about it. And the first is the classic, the old Maxxbass. Is that the one? Yes, they've changed the look of it, I think. Wow. Okay. I'm getting surprised here. I haven't seen this. I'm used to the old look. Is there an old look where I can change it back to that? Not that I want to. I'm quite happy with the new look. This is a classic plugin which does something to the bass. Dan Morrell's done a kind of a video trying to break down what it does to the bass, but it produces upper harmonics and basically makes you think that you're hearing 40 hertz when you're not, which can give you a lot more headroom on a mix to be able to sort of turn it up so you can get real thumping kicks at the bottom end, real thumping bass at the bottom end. And actually it doesn't contain the bottom end you think it does, because you're being tricked into thinking you're hearing the bottom end. And Waves Maxxbass has been doing this really well for years. I've just opened it there and seen a completely new UI that that I didn't even know existed. So whatever my last update between the last time I used it and now, it works perfectly. The other Waves bottom end plugin, which I have been using only recently, I'd never really used it before, but someone suggested it on a bass guitar of something I was mixing. They were going, maybe add a bit more sub with that, and I opened it up, and lo and behold, it worked. And I've actually used it on a kit and also a drum stem since then. Some really interesting things. You kind of got 2 octaves lower and 1 octave lower sub-harmonic synthesizer. It's called Submarine. You can change where you kind of want to trigger from in this signal. You've got a mix knob, you've got drive, you've got dynamics, all of that. Realistically, I've opened it up. If I just do a reset on that, and if I'm doing a bass guitar or something like that, I'll probably just turn sub 2 down to maybe sort of -8, something like that. Sub 1 down to -4, and maybe add a touch of drive, and that's it. And you know, you get some really nice low end. So the Maxxbass kind of makes you think you're getting low end when you're not, and the Submarine actually does add real low end. This is a new thing for me. I've never really wanted to add extra sub to things. Usually I'm trying to get rid of it, but in a mix I did recently, this was really useful, and then I've used it another couple of times, and it's good. So if there's an equivalent to that you think might be better, because the reason I used this was because it was someone else said I'll put that on that and that will work. So if you think that I'm missing a trick, they go, oh no, you've got to try the whatever blah 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 plugin by who gives a fuck. I will quite happily try it, because it's literally in the last month or two that I've tried this. But it's making the list because I did use it this year. It's not something that sits right with me using that too much. So yeah, I want your feedback on that. I want your feedback on all of it. Just leave me a comment. I like comments. Just laugh at the fact that I poured tea all over myself at the beginning of the video. Just any kind of engagement helps in the YouTube algorithm. And I am just a views whore. That's what I am. So Auto Align 2, that's my next plugin. Now, I made a fairly, I wouldn't say it was scathing, but I did a video on Auto Align 2 where I kind of said I prefer doing everything manually and it doesn't really work for me. And it's weird because the drums that I actually pulled out for that demo, it didn't do a very good job on them. But other drum kits, maybe with less room, they've sounded really good with Auto Align, and I've found it really useful. And I've also gone into some settings that when I did that first video, I didn't know existed. And when it works really well. And then sometimes it just seems really random and it's absolutely useless. So I have used Auto Align 2. In fact, Auto Align 2 is part of my drum kit template, but that doesn't mean I use it all the time. What I'll do is I'll give it a go with Auto Align, and if it does the job, then I'll just move on, because I'm all about just moving on and getting things done. But if it doesn't do the job, then I'll kind of do a manual job. And you know, I can tell when it's working, and you just put it on, you go, oh wow, that sounds instantly better, and it's great. And then maybe you just move the room mics back a bit, or something else, you know, to tweak the settings a little bit. But when it's right, it just gets it perfect straight away. And when it's wrong, it's more than useless. You think, why do you think that the Tom 1 is like 800 milliseconds out from Tom 2? And you think, how did you reach that conclusion? And I think some of it's, again, if stuff is overly roomy or overly trashy, I don't think it's very good. And also, I've been working on something recently, actually, that was recorded back in the 90s, I believe. And the band sent me their album multitrack, and it was all recorded back from the original tapes, which was nice, hearing stuff that was recorded on tape again. But the snare and the toms were fairly heavily gated to the tape, which was a fairly common thing, particularly in budget studios back in the day, because you didn't have enough gates and compressors on the way back to gate and compress everything. So you kind of, a lot of people would gate toms, bass drum, snare drum to the tape, but then Auto Align doesn't really work well with that stuff, because it's not really getting enough tom hits, and you're not getting the background noise to kind of correlate. So you're not hearing the snare in the toms, you're not hearing the toms in the snare drum or whatever. And Auto Align just really didn't work well on that at all. So I just manually kind of aligned the overheads and the snare and called it a day. And actually it worked fine just doing that. So yeah, not an every session use plugin, but it's a lot better than I thought it was when I did my first review. Oh, I'm all over the place today. I'm dropping things. I'm trying to look up what the next plugin is. I went through all my sessions and put them on my phone so I could be organised. Now I'm dropping my phone. The next one that I've used this year, and I never really used it much before, is Smart Deess. I like Smart Deess 90% of the time. This isn't a voice, so I'm not going to hit analyze voice, but 90% of the time it just does, I hit analyze voice, play a bit of, the singer or speech as well, like on this video. I'll analyze it and it will say what it thinks it wants to do, and then I just dial it back by 10%, and it's right. It gets rid of plosives, plosives. Let's see if it got rid of those. And sibilants. She sells seashells on the seashore. It will try and get rid of some of the sibilants as well. And yeah, it works really quickly. I don't want to sit there dialing in all that stuff by hand. It's boring. It's not creative. It's not musical. It's not the bit of the mix that I'm interested in. So if I can whack on a plugin, solve those problems, that's great. And this does it really, really well. And I've only been using that this year. So yeah, big shout out to that. The next one, which I really like, I know some people haven't really liked it, but is the Waves Silk Vocal plugin. On a voice, obviously it's designed for voice, I think it sounds really good. I've never really got into all these kind of resonance suppression plugins like Soothe and other such things like that. I mean, resonances kind of are what give the instrument their tone. So it's more about annoying things where there might be a ring within the microphone if it's a cheap microphone, or something within the room that's annoying me. You know, that's when I want to suppress a resonance. But this, just to kind of get rid of a bit of boom, mostly just on the low and the high, and then a little bit of sibilance. So this works well as a kind of a type of de-esser, I suppose, and also get rid of some of the boom. But the places I use it most are not actually on vocals. I've found this fairly useful on overheads, drum overheads. I've used it on guitars, particularly electric guitars, where you want that real top end, but it just starts to get harsh. I've used that on those, and it sounds nice. And I don't really have much else in terms of resonance suppressor plugins. We'll get to that. You know, I don't have Soothe, and for the amount that I want to use anything like that, I don't really want to go and buy a plugin specifically for that thing, and because it doesn't, in my workflow, it just doesn't come up very often. It's just like that. You're doing a mix and there's that one acoustic guitar that's just a bit scratchy on the top end, or there's that one big rhythm sound that comes in and it sounds chunky and you like all the brightness, but it's just a little bit harsh, and I chuck that on and it works. And I don't think I need anything more. You know, I've got enough plugins. I really don't need to buy more plugins. So I just kind of whack that over it, even if it's not for a vocal. I know it's designed for vocal, but and it just does what I want, and most of it is just low and high. I don't do a lot with the mids on it. And you can also, you press the delta button, listen to what it's taking out, and whenever I do that, I think, yeah, that's not very nice, sort of, it's unmusical stuff that it's taking out. And yeah, so that's in my arsenal. That's something I still use. I suppose this category of things is sort of like almost like repairing things or gating things out or fixing stuff. So in that respect, Smart Gate is another one of the Sonible Smart plugins I've only started using recently in the last few months. I've had it for ages, and wow, it really cleans up vocals. It really cleans up drums. It's sort of intelligent. It's kind of detecting, is this a voice or is this background noise, and is this a snare drum, is this a tom-tom? And again, it teaches itself apparently, but then I kind of either dial it back a bit. You know, with drums, the impact I'll bring back to sort of maybe somewhere between 30 and 50%, because I don't want complete tight gating or whatever, but it does the job so well. And again, SmartEQ, the Smart Deess and Smart Gate, let's say on a noisy vocal or something like that, before I reprint through the blueies, and I don't have to do any work. It's like having an assistant that's kind of got all the boring bits done for me. So very happy with Smart Gate. That's kind of a discovery this year that I'm using more and more. One that you've seen me use and is kind of becoming an industry standard for drum gating is the Silencer by Black Salt Audio. This is great because of the D-bleed, and it's particularly good if you've got sort of heavier drums, if you're like rock metal type stuff. That's great. For softer stuff, I don't find it works as well, and I find that if you clean up the signal a bit beforehand, so if I use Smart Gate before it to get it most of the way there, and then I use Silencer for the D-bleed function, I find Silencer on its own, sometimes it can miss one if you get the threshold wrong, and then if you get every snare through, then every now and again it will let through a spike of something else. So I don't think the gating on it is anywhere near as good as Smart Gate, but the way it gates with the D-bleed is much better. So sometimes I end up using both. If I want really isolated sort of snare drum, bass drum, toms, I will use the Silencer after Smart Gate. I used to use Silencer sort of pretty much on its own as it was intended. I just found that every now and again I'd have to go through and, you know, use clip gain to turn down missed triggers and stuff like that, which I know that's the job. I mean, that's part of mixing, isn't it? Going through and preparing your multi-track. But sometimes I'm just too lazy for that. And if I can back on SmartGate and that, I want to get to the bit where I'm fitting the sounds to each other. I'm making musical decisions and I'm creating the landscape and I'm turning the song into something that I like the sound of. I can, but I don't want to spend loads and loads of time sitting there finding that resonant frequency or turning things up and down so that, you know, the drum is properly gated. For me, that's just procedural, boring stuff that I have done for years manually, and I have no need to prove that I can do that by doing it in every session. If there's a bit of software that can do that, just get on with it and let me get to the bit that I enjoy. Clarity VX, yeah, so more for video side of stuff like interviews and talking, but I have used it on live vocals where there's a lot of background noise from the band coming through. And also if I've got, let's say, a live recording of something and I want to take the vocal out and the singer, you know, I'm going to fly in a vocal from another gig because they sung it better. But he's all, you know, the singer might be all over the room mics. I can actually use Clarity VX to isolate the vocal and then put it out of phase with the original single and kind of remove the vocal from the room, and then I could put in a different night where they sung it better. I mean, when this came out, I'll show you the plugin. I've got the posh one as well, but a lot of the time I just use the cheaper version because it does the job. When this first came out, it was a game changer. I don't think anyone was doing that kind of AI voice isolation in a really simple plugin that you could just sort of turn up more of it. And they really nailed it. Now, since then, when I'm doing video editing now, I'll grab this if I really feel that, you know, the vocals, because this does work really well. But the stuff that's built into DaVinci Resolve for voice isolation is equally as good, if not slightly better, when there's not much background noise. So for example, a video like this, I might dull the one in DaVinci Resolve in by like 30% just to get rid of a bit of background noise. You know, there was a siren that just went past. That'll probably come out. But the Clarity VX I'll be using more as a plugin in a mix. So for example, mixing a live band, they've recorded a song over 4 nights. They play to a click live, so everything's in time. The second night was the best take, but the vocalist was better on the third night. Well, let's remove the vocals from the second night by using a phase trick, and then let's put the third night vocals onto the second night and take out some of the background noise out of the live singer's mic, and then they all kind of fit together. If you do it carefully, it'll fit together, and that's what I'd use Clarity VX for. But in the past, you know, on video stuff, interview stuff, particularly if you're outside, there's road noise or anything like that, this was a game-changing plugin, and it still gets used as a kind of a fix type plugin. Highly recommended. And my last of the kind of fix type plugins is the D-Click RX8. I haven't upgraded my Isotope plugins for ages, but this is the only one that I've used this year, probably in the last 2 years, the only Isotope plugin I've used. But the RX D-Click, just brilliant for getting out, particularly like I'd use it on a bass for like when someone's playing fingers and you've got an excessive amount of click, 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 you know, it sounds like that they've been hitting a Rickenbacker with a baseball bat, you know. This plugin will sort that out. If there's any little digital clips and spikes or something because someone sent you something and it was badly recorded, or I don't use it that often, but when I do, it's absolutely invaluable. In fact, I had a guitar recently where there was it was on a whammy pedal, Digitech whammy pedal, and it just had, when it was up the octave, it had these kind of scratchy artifacts that sounded like little clicks on the guitar. And when I had the treble of the guitar where I wanted it to be sort of tonally within the mix, you could really hear these little spikes and clicks, and I used that plugin to get rid of those, and it worked brilliantly. So yeah, hideously out of date. I think they're up to sort of RX version 874 by now, but I'm still using version 8 and it does what I want it to do. So I'm not upgrading unless someone in the comments tells me I'm an idiot, and then I'm going to feel like my life is worthless unless I upgrade. And then, you know, just to impress that person, I will go and upgrade to the latest one. Okay, let's come to the compressors. So my go-to 76 compressor, which I've been using for a long time, is the IK Black 76. This sounds closest to all of my Blackline Audio 1176 style compressors. It sounds nothing like the Blueies, but don't expect to. The Blueies are their own beast. But this sounds like, you know, my normal sort of 1176 style compressors that I've got, the Blackline Audio ones. I still prefer the outboard stuff, but if I'm mixing stuff on the road, or let's say I've got, you know, 54 backing vocal tracks, which might sound excessive, but that has actually happened recently. I'm certainly going to reprint all of those. So I might whack them through something analog outboard as a group, but I wasn't going to reprint all of those. So I just whacked that across everything. It just sounded instantly great. So I'm a really big fan of this IK Black 76 plugin. When it comes to 2As, because obviously 76 and 2As go hand in hand, and I'm not a big fan of the IK 2A plugin. We maybe get to that later in the video. The one that I use is this one here for pretty much everything that I do. Is there an expansion on that? Yes, I can do that, right. So it's the UAD LA2A tube compressor. Now, I've pulled these up on Plugin Doctor because there's 3 of these LA2A plugins that they sell as a pack, right? And there's also the LA2 plugin, which comes as part of the pack. So you're sold this pack and it's like you get 4 plugins. Wow, isn't that brilliant? 4 plugins, right? They all pretty much do exactly the same thing. There's a tiny little EQ difference between them, tiny little bit of attack and release difference between them, and the saturation is a little bit different, okay? But trust me, I've written some plugins now, and I've been a computer programmer for more years than I've been an audio person, right? Audio engineer, whatever you want to call me. Trust me, all of that stuff, it's the same plugin with a few parameters tweaked. All of those 4 plugins could be in one plugin with a switch down here where you kind of go mode 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you get all the different modes. And it annoys me that they're 4 plugins, and they only do that so that they can go, here, buy this pack of plugins. You get 4 plugins for only blah, 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 blah. Whereas selling you one plugin for $60 is going to feel like less value for money than 4 plugins for $60. But those 4 plugins, I'd like it all in one plugin so that I could load up the tube one, go, well, will the silver one work better on this? And just kind of change between them, keeping the, you know, the makeup gain and the peak reduction the same. And what happens is I end up not experimenting because of that. This tube compressor here is the one that sounds to my ears, and according to the graphs on Plugin Doctor, as close as possible to my Blackline Audio 2A models, and I like the sound of them, and I like the sound of this. So if I'm looking for a 2A, I just grab that, or I have it loaded within the Softube plugin, because luckily the Softube plugin can load this. So that is my general go-to LA2A plugin, with the caveat that I fucking hate them for making 4 plugins that should have just been one. And I also hate the fact that it always wants to phone home all the time. You know, it's like I've been on a plane, headphones in, trying to do something using this plugin, and because I haven't got internet access, or if I have, the internet access is crap, I can't use the plugin. I mean, it's like I used it yesterday. Surely give me a month's grace before phoning home and cutting off my access. So I've got a lot of problems with UAD. That's why I don't use a lot of UAD stuff, because I generally hate it, but some of the stuff's really good. I mean, their 76 ones are nice, but I don't use them. I prefer the IK one because that just works year on year, whether I connect to the internet or not. That's a really big deal. I mean, when you're on tour, I spend 6 months of my life on tour. And I don't always have the best internet connection on tour buses or hotels or whatever. And I still want to be able to use my tools without having to connect to the internet. I understand maybe once a month, just check that I'm a legitimate paid up user, but not every session. I mean, I've had situations where I'll be using the computer and I'll have an internet connection, then the hotel internet will go off and the plugin will stop working. I mean, it will still put the audio through it, but I can't edit it. I can't change the parameters till I get an internet connection back, you know, and that really winds me up. So so fuck you, UAD, but I do like this 2A plugin. So that's why I use it. Right. I've talked about that long enough. Comprexxor. God, I love this plugin. Right. I mean, this is a kind of a one-size-fits-all compressor plugin. This does so much. I mean, obviously, it's a model of a distressor. It's the IK Comprexxor. The one plugin that kind of rivals some of my outboard gear is this. And I'll tell you what, the Distortion 2, Distortion 3, you got the second and third harmonic distortions going on there, and the ability to effectively dial that in as much as you want. Do you know what? Sometimes if I want in the box saturation, sometimes I put this on 1-to-1 and I effectively get rid of the compressor because I'm not interested in the compressor in this all the time. And I just use this as a saturator. And it sounds great. But as a compressor, it sounds great. It's got so many options on it. I've actually found this better than some of my outboard gear when I've done certain things. So there will be times when I will be messing around with outboard stuff, trying to, like Drum Crush, for example, the song Foxes that I put out on my channel not that long ago. You got all the multi-track, you heard the mix, everything like that, and it's got this kind of sort of drum sound at the beginning, and then that carries on slightly quieter underneath as a parallel kind of crush track. And I used the plugin because I was going through all sorts of different outboard stuff, and this just did what I wanted it to do better. So yeah, big fan of this compressor plugin. I like a lot of the IK T-Rax 5, what is now, and the T-Rax 6 plugins. We'll get some more of those, but this one, if you don't want to buy the whole pack, I would say get this one. In fact, I should note that down. Tip on that, and that's a future video coming soon. Should I tell you that now? Let's wait till the end of this bit. I'm going to note down what I want to say here so I don't forget. Let's move on. Bus Compressor. I do like the IK stuff. I will give a shout out actually to another one in a minute, but this IK Bus Compressor, SSL style bus compressor, just sounds amazing. And I've not every circumstance. In fact, I had a drum kit recently where I was using a fast attack. Usually I don't use fast attack on a drum bus, maybe on a parallel drum bus, but on a normal drum bus compression. But I did recently because I was going for a specific sound, and this didn't do as well at the fast stuff as my Wes Audio Dione. But on a kind of a more standard setting, you know, like 30 or 10 millisecond attack and, you know, fast or auto release stuff that you usually do on a drum bus, you know, maybe sidechain high pass at 60 hertz or something like that. I can actually get this to sound like the Wes Audio Dione. Let's leave aside the total harmonic distortion options. Just from the compression side, this is the closest I've got, and I never regret using this as a bus compressor, and it does come out all the time. Now, the faster attack stuff, absolutely prefer the Wes Audio or the Bus Plus, and compared to the Bus Plus, this thing doesn't even touch the sides. But there was a point where I was considering selling the Wes Audio Dione because the way I was using it, I found wasn't giving me any more than this plugin, and it's had a reprieve recently because I was going to sell it, and it's had a reprieve when I was using it on the higher faster attack time, not higher attack time, faster attack time, when I was using it on that, and then I was trying to get a plug-in to match and I couldn't. So the Dione is a really wonderful piece of equipment, so I'm not by any means slagging it off, but in an A/B test, if I can't tell the difference between a piece of my outboard and a plug-in, then I'm going to go with the plugin because it's recallable, even though the Wes Audio Dione is recallable. But yeah, I've used that in other ways recently where I can't actually get the sound easily out of plugins. So that's been spared. I was thinking of selling the Dione and getting the rear. There's some other things that I'm going to sell. I'm mostly happy with everything. That's a different video. I'm not going to talk about that now. Let's move on. Here is another classic compressor that was modelled by IK Multimedia. I've got the Waves one of these and the IK one. I don't have the UAD one because fuck you, UAD. Whenever I've wanted that kind of Fairchild-y type thing, this has worked really nicely. I've got the Tube Core compressor, the real, real Verymu, all valve, beautiful, and so I'm much more likely to use that. But sometimes I have used that this year, this plugin this year, quite a bit, and even the other day I did end up putting this on something, and I do really like it. I can't say that it's the best Fairchild because I don't have a Fairchild. This is certainly better than the Waves one at the things that I want to do. It doesn't sound as good as my IGS Tube Core Verymu compressor. And all this time constant stuff, I wish it had a better attack and release so that I could actually dial in the attack and release that I want. I wish someone did a Fairchild-like plugin that gave you the character of Fairchild but also allowed you to dial in things that a Fairchild doesn't do. But it's in here because I've used it. It's certainly not something that I grab all the time. When I want it, I use this one and it works. Okay, last in the compression section for now. One that might surprise you. It's a Waves plugin. Oh, yeah. The Waves DPR 402 plugin. Now, I have a real DPR 402 sitting at the bottom of my rack down there. And I love this for overheads. It's pretty much the only thing that I ever use, either the real unit or the software version on. But my old DPR 402 is crackly. It's difficult to set each side the same. Even when they're linked, it doesn't quite work. I think the unit's probably just getting old. And every A/B test I've done, I can't tell much difference between this plugin and my real one for the use that I use it for. I'm sure there's extreme settings on there that this won't do. If anything, the difference between the two is the fact that the real one rounds off a bit of top end, which is not something I actually want, particularly with overheads. So the plugin is kind of more useful in some ways. And I think Waves have done an excellent job because they've got what I like about my DPR 402 compressor, but they've, fixed the things that I don't like about it. And all those jumpers around the back as well with all the options on the real one, you can kind of do all of that stuff just in software. So unless I'm feeling spicy, I'll admit, most of the time I don't turn the real one on and I just use this plugin because it's much more convenient. So yeah, that ends the compressor bit. Now, something that I'm going to make a video of, and I don't know when I'm going to do that, but it's going to be an interesting video. So subscribe so that you don't miss out on that one. There are friends of mine, mostly guitarists, that have guitar amp simulation software. I'm going to use Amplitube as an example here because I have it. And then they say to me, I want to get into mixing. What should I get? And they're sort of like, should I get the IK, for example, the IK T-Rex 6 plugin set with all the 76 and the 2A and this compressor and the 73, whatever. And I'm using IK as an example, but it could be a Waves pack. It could be a Stephen Slate pack. It could be anything. This principle works with a lot of different manufacturers. If I turn the amp and the speaker off in Amplitube, you're just going to get the signal. And if I switch this to stereo mode, so we're getting stereo signal processing. So I'm just going to turn all the amp stuff off. You're basically just going to get a pass-through of the original signal. The Amplitube plugin there is doing nothing. And then look here what we've got that we can put over the end. Oh, I've got the Black 76. Input, output, ratio, attack, release. Oh, great. What else have I got? I've got their 2A model, which I don't particularly like, but leaving that aside, we've got it. Oh, we've got the their 670. It's a little bit of a cut down version, but there's so much stuff that comes in Amplitube, which is provably, through null tests and looking in plugin doctor whether, provably the same algorithm. So if you own Amplitube and you're not mixing day to day, you know, and you just want a good 76 plugin, you want this, you don't actually need to buy other plugins, because you can just use Amplitube. You can use it for reverbs, you can use it for delays. It's got phasers and EQs, and here we go. We've got the EQ81, so we've got the high and the low pass, the 4-band EQ. You can put it in mic mode there, you know, use the saturation. There's move them all around. There's so much in Amplitube that I'm trying to save you money here. If you already own something like Amplitube, which has a load of those kind of things in, question whether you need to buy other plugins, because the Black 76 in Amplitube is the same as the Black 76 that I use. Now, I use the Black 76 because I've got it already, and it's easier as a user interface than loading up Amplitube and turning off the amps and blah, 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 blah. But if you're not someone that's earning money mixing, or you're not someone that does a lot of mixing, you just need a compressor because you're doing some demos at home or whatever, and you've already got Amplitube, use it. Don't spend money on other plugins. You've already got loads of great compressors, loads of great reverbs, loads of great EQs, loads of great saturators, all built into this one plugin. So just bear that in mind. Bear that in mind. Right, Smart Limit. I don't know how I feel about this plugin, Smart Limit. I think I like it. So I used to use the Stealth Limiter as my final kind of plugin on a mastering chain, IK Stealth Limiter. And that's definitely cleaner Stealth Limiter. If I want my mix to sound exactly like I mixed it, and I just want to bring up the level and I don't want it to be fucked with too much, I will use Stealth Limiter by IK Multimedia, which I think is, no, I haven't actually got it on this list. I'm an idiot. I'm going to, right, Stealth Limiter. Because I used this the other day. I haven't used it for a while, but I did use this the other day. I haven't used it for a while, and then I used it the other day, so now I have used it for a while. I don't want to confuse you. So I like this plugin. You got, intersample, peak limiter. You can choose 16 times oversampling on that. I've got Unity gain monitor. I've got 4 different modes. I pretty much only ever use it in tight or balanced. And I've been using this for years. Set a out ceiling of 1 dB, turn up the input, Bob's your uncle, you got a louder track. And I really like that plugin. Then I started using Smart Limit just to see what it was like. And if I've got a problematic track, or I've got something where just something's sticking out, the balance here, the balance knob, is doing something EQ wise, or saturating certain frequencies and using harmonics to fool your mind into thinking you're still hearing it, some bottom end when you're not, or whatever. This fucks with your audio a hell of a lot more. And sometimes that's really good, and sometimes it's not. And I don't trust it, even when I turn the balance down to 0 and saturation down to 0 and just keep the style in the middle and all of that. And if I'm just using it purely as a limiter, I don't trust that it's not fucking with my mix in a way that the Stealth Limiter, I'm pretty sure, isn't. It's just a straight limiter. But saying that, when it does fuck with my mix, I really quite like it. When it does a good job of it, I really quite like it. Particularly when there's a lot of stuff going on. So if I've got a rock track with loads of guitars, loads of vocals, everything's fighting for space, I'm more likely to use Smart Limit over the end of a mastering chain. But something like our Dark Side of the Moon live version, which went out on YouTube. I'll link it in the description, I think. Went out live on YouTube, mixed it all from the multi-track and was trying to get it to sound as close to Dark Side of the Moon as I could. Smart Limit was definitely not the plugin for that, because I got the mix exactly as I wanted it, and all I wanted to do was bring up the level without fucking with the mix, and Smart Limit did not do the job, so I used the stealth limiter on that, the IK stealth limiter. But Smart Limit has become more of my workflow depending on music, and it's something I'm still, I don't really know what it's doing under the hood that makes things sometimes sound better but sometimes makes things sound worse. It's like all the smart plugins. We're going to get to another one of those a bit later on. Use with caution, but when it works, wow. Bit like SmartEQ, bit like Smart Deess, all of those things. When they're good, they're good, and use them, because if it gets you closer to your finished goal, then why not? What's the next one on here? The BX Clipper. Oh, I've only started using this. I've had it for ages, but I've only started using this in the last month or two. Yeah, and I've found it really easy, really good. I'm sure I'm not a fan of clippers particularly. I'd never clipped anything for back in the day, and then the first clipper I used was one of the IK clippers. Wasn't overly impressed with that, and then I've had this one and it's really good. Someone else, friend of mine, Liam, texted me and said, oh, I use this, everyone uses that, it's like the industry standard. I can't remember what it is, I'd have to look it up in my text. But so I'm in the market for trying some other clippers, but this one has been working nicely for me. Literally in the last 2 months, a couple of things I've worked on, I've used this in the mastering chain, and I think I put it over a drum bus on one song, and it was very nice. So shout out to that plugin. I haven't used it enough to rave about it, but it's useful. Next one that I use in my mastering chain is the IK Multimedia 1 plugin, which is kind of like their one plugin fits all mastering plugin. And I turn that off, I turn that down, I turn the bass punch down, I turn the analog down. So basically, if you bypassed it, it doesn't do anything. And the only real things I ever use it for is a little bit of width, never much more than that, and a little bit of transient. And then sometimes, if I'm feeling spicy, I will turn up the air a little bit. And that's all I use it for these days. I have used it in the past for a little bit more, but I like the way you can turn up or down. In fact, I had a mix recently where I turned down the transients, but went a little bit transient heavy on that mix, and I kind of pulled them back a bit. But yeah, usually sort of just taking that up to 1 for transients, a little bit of width, maybe 0.5, and on some occasions just use the air. And it's really good. It just works for what I want it to do. Right, we're into reverbs and delays. I've really narrowed down what I use reverb and delay wise. And I also want to say at this point in the video, let me finish this quickly. A bit more tea pouring. Someone's just listening to this. That could have sounded like I was having a piss, but it is tea pouring. I was going to say something, what was it? Oh yeah, that was it. There's a lot of things I will mention later. There's a lot of plugins that I use that are built into Cubase, and I'm not putting any of those in these lists. That's going to come later on in this video, as if this video isn't long enough already. But yeah, I do use quite a few stock plugins. So if you're thinking, well, why hasn't he mentioned blah, 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 blah? I'll get to it. But reverb-wise, my reverb of the year for me, the one that I've used most, is the Fame Studio Reverb by IK Multimedia. Right, so things that I like about it. It's got all the room and everything like that, but I rarely use the rooms that are built in, even though they've got a load of different rooms. What I use is the plate, and I'm really enjoying the plate in this. Usually it's either on 2.5 seconds or 1.5 seconds. I can dial back a bit of the decay to taste. Great pre-delay, nice and simple. I usually use it in vintage mode, but modern is a bit sort of brighter and a bit more boring. But I usually use it in vintage mode. I usually bring up the high pass filter just a touch, bring down the top a bit with the low pass filter, and then sometimes boost the high. So I might bring the low pass filter down quite a bit and then boost the high, so you get that kind of push pull thing going on, maybe take out some of the low. But the greatest thing is obviously if I'm using it on a send, then it's 100% wet and that's all I care about. One thing I hate on reverbs, which the one that I used to use a lot, which was the UAD Pure Plate, that had a wet dry mix. And that just annoys me, because if I've got the dry where I want and then I want to add a bit of reverb, let's say I've got this over a bus, like all my chorus vocals or something, I don't want to dial in more reverb and have it pull down the dry signal because it's a wet dry mix. And this is great because I can have the dry up, you know, full, and then just dial in the reverb, and I'm not changing the level of my dry signal. And it's yeah, it works exactly like it just sounds good. It works exactly like I want it to. It's a great sounding plate reverb. I prefer it to the Abbey Road plates that Waves do. I prefer it now to the UAD Pure Plate, which actually does sound really good, but I have to combine other plugins with it to do the EQ stuff. And if I want a little bit of saturation on the plate, you know, with this I can go to that vintage and get it, whereas with the UAD Pure Plate plugin, I just have to use like 4 plugins to get what I get with one plugin on this. So really impressed with this plugin. So Reverence, built into Cubase, can play impulse responses. So you know, you can load in any reverb IR that you get from someone. Oh, there's loads of plugins that do that. But if I go to let's have a look here. If I go to my impulses, I downloaded Big G's Lexicon 480L Reverb folder. You can go and Google that and you get a load of Lexicon Reverb IRs. And I downloaded them a couple of months ago. He's had them up online for ages. And I've really enjoyed like the drum plate and a couple of others. So for like short reverb for toms and snare and whatever, I've been using this guy's Lexicon impulses in the last few months and using the built-in Cubase plugin. But every DAW's got an IR plugin that will do. So the plugin's not really important. It's more about getting this guy's impulse responses from Lexicons. And so I've really enjoyed that. So it's not a plugin as such. I don't care about the plugin. It's more the fact that you can go and he's given them away for free. I'll put a link to his, I've got to remember to put loads of links in this video, but I'll put a link to his website in that, and grab them and you won't be sorry for it, because you're effectively just getting a free Lexicon. I know it's not exactly the same, but it's good enough for what I do. IK Delay Lab. If you've seen any of my mix videos over the last year or so, you'll know that I pretty much use this. I put this on any time on anything I need a delay for. Obviously, you've got timing options, so you can do it in time with the song, or you can turn off sync and dial in the milliseconds. You've got all the usual sort of ping pong or stereo, mono, whatever. I usually keep it in stereo mode unless I'm looking for a ping pong thing. And then I turn the doubling on, which just kind of gives a little bit of difference on the left and the right and kind of gives it some sort of chorusing. Usually, you know, bit of high pass, bit of low pass. I mean, that's literally what I do when I open this plugin, is I usually turn the feedback down a little bit, turn up the doubling, bit of low pass, bit of high pass, and it works. And it just sounds good. It's one of those that I don't have to do too much thinking about. It just works out the box and sounds great. And really happy with that. So the moment I got that plugin and put it on, I've not gone back to another delay plugin. I've used that anytime I need a delay, with the exception of the IK Tape Echo, which I used to use quite a while back, and then I forgot about it. And then recently, with that session that I was talking about where I'd had all those files, a whole album from a 24-track tape, and they were looking for something that sounded a little bit more classic and old, sort of 60s, early 70s sounding. And I used this for my kind of vocal delay send, and it sounded great, and I'd forgotten how good it sounded. So this is now back in my arsenal. If I'm not using the IK Delay Lab, I'm using the IK Tape delay. Okay, what do we got next? Right, here's one that people will hate me for, but I don't care. The CLA Effects plugin. I use this for two things and two things only. So turn everything off. And then use it for tape phase, which sounds great. Just the tape phase sounds amazing. I've not found another plugin that is that easy to use where you just get that classic old vintage tape phase sound as well as this plugin. Or I use it for filter or telephone. So if you want that telephone vocal sound or a filtered vocal sound for something a bit more like a radio, again, I could set this up. In fact, I've analysed it and done it and got saturator and EQ before, EQ after, and a compressor. It's 4 plugins with loads of settings to do something where I can just put this on, click on telephone and turn it up to taste. So I still use this CLA Effects plugin purely for telephone and for more likely for the tape phase. I really like this. In fact, Mix did the other day for a band called the Aardvarks, old band. In the mastering, we wanted the whole song just going through a tape phase. So I ran a parallel track of the whole song before it went to all the mastering plugins, brought one up and brought the main mix down. So I had this tape phase plugin over the whole mix and just mixed a bit of it in and mixed the dry out and then brought it back up with automation and just had a bit on the end of the song where it went all kind of 60s and tape phase. And the band loved it. And this sounded great. You know, I thought I was listening to the Small Faces, to be honest. It sounded really, really good. If someone gives me the name of another plugin that they think would be better, because obviously everyone hates Waves, so I just shouldn't be using Waves out of principle. But if someone gives me a better non-Waves plugin, it sounds good, I might try that out. But for now, I'm sticking with that one. And the last of these CLA ones... Oh, okay. I made a mistake there. I'm going to leave it in. I thought it was the CLA Vocals plugin that does the throws, does the vocal throws, but actually it's not. So I do use one other thing on this CLA Effects plugin. So ignore what I said earlier about it only being used for like telephone and tape phase. I do on the long delay setting, because you can just automate. You can just click on the word that you want the vocal to throw. So if you want, you know, like on Pink Floyd Come Through Your where it's like, hello, 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 and it kind of throws the vocal, you know, come on now. And you've got that kind of echo of a throw of a vocal, and it will do it in time, full, half, or quarter note. And this just makes it really easy rather than setting up a delay plugin or a send or whatever. Sometimes I just use this. I used it on Foxes, if you go back to that mix, and it worked really well. So that's another shout out for the CLA Effects plugin, which I thought that feature was in the CLA vocals. So shows you sometimes I don't even have a clue what I'm talking about. The only other kind of channel strip type thing that I'm going to give a shout out to, got the IK British channel here, which is basically an SSL channel. Now, I'm telling you this for free, and I might do a video about it. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video about it. But I've checked my EQs, the real SSL 500 EQs, out against various plugins to see which plugin actually sounds the same or as good or whatever, and which one gives me the same EQ curves. And hands down, this SSL kind of model EQ sounds and, you know, produces the curves exactly the same as the real hardware. I mean, if you turn the Q up full or turn it down to its minimum, it will do exactly the same shapes as on the hardware. So some of the Waves ones actually do wider and do narrower, which you might think is better, and that's up to you, and I completely understand the argument for that. The SSL ones are, in my opinion, by far the worst. The SSL plugins, they don't match the hardware. So again, if I'm using the real ones and then I want to do some other bits and pieces that might be in the background, I'm going to be doing it in the box, I will grab this EQ, but it's also got the compressor and everything else. So I do like this plugin, and I have used it in the last year, but I find myself using it less and less and less. The IK Leslie, their Leslie simulator, because I do use their Hammond instrument. I'm not getting into instruments in this video, instrument plugins. This is purely just kind of like audio plugins, processing plugins and stuff, but I do use their Leslie quite a bit. It sounds fantastic. It is authorized, I believe, by Leslie. Same as their Hammond plugin is authorized by Hammond as kind of like the official, or one of the official Leslie plugins. But this sounds absolutely great. You've got a choice over all these different amp types and cab types, and it's just a wonderful plugin for Leslie simulation. And funnily enough, I've used it on bass a little bit. Like I'll keep the sub of the bass mono, and then I've put the upper mids of the bass through that, taking the drum down, so you're just getting the horn of the Leslie. I think I did that on Fox's, and it sounds great. But it's one of those things, that Leslie's also in Amplitube, so if you've got Amplitube, you don't need to buy that Leslie plugin. You can use it built into Amplitube. So saved you some money there. Thank me in the comments. Trigger 2. Most of you should know this. It's a fairly standard plugin. It's a triggering plugin where, you know, it hears the snare drum sound and it will trigger another snare drum sound. And this is, I mean, the free version of it, there's a free version of it, which, you know, has got a couple of different snares, a couple of different bass drums. I think that's it. I mean, most of the time I am just triggering bass drum and snare drum, and I'll have different triggers for close and room. Sometimes I'll only use room. Sometimes I use room and a bit of close. My drum template handles all of that and automatically loads on, so I don't need to load it on. I've got a triggered snare and a triggered room snare and bass drum and whatever built in if I want to turn them up. And yeah, I used to do the thing that we all did where you'd use Cubase or Logic or whatever to turn the snare drum track to MIDI notes, and then I'd load in an instrument and trigger off, or load in a software sampler and trigger off a snare drum from that. And now Trigger 2 just saves all that. You know, it just works straight out the box. And I've used it loads. And because I bought it, this isn't the free version, you also get loads of kicks, snares, toms, you know, just loads that comes with it. And you've got room, all different types of mics and stuff like that. Really wonderful plugin. So yeah, I use that for any of my kind of drum augmentation or replacement. So what else do I use? These are kind of imager plugins. Here we go. The Classic Waves S1 Imager. I don't use it a lot, but when I do use it, it's mostly on things like overheads or rooms. I either want to just add a bit of width, or in the case of overheads, sometimes I want to bring them in a little bit. And then sometimes I just want to turn something to mono just for compatibility checking. And this is quite an easy plugin to do that. You can polarity flip one side as well. There's a few things that it just does very simply, which you can do with other plugins, but I've been using that one years, and it's really easy to load, and it just does what I want it to do. A bit of a shout out to my own first ever plugin, the RS2, because that's the name of my studio, the RS2 Mono2Stereo plugin. Look, it's resizable. Shit interface, but it absolutely works. All the code for this, and I did a fix for it recently, there was a bug in it, and I've updated the GitHub. So although you can't actually download the plugin, you can download the code and download the Juice framework and just do a build of it. So I've released all the code for free. This just turns mono signals to stereo by using a delay, which effectively creates comb filtering, and then you put that comb filtering, polarity reversed on the other side, so where you've got notches on one side, you've got cuts on the other, a bit like the graphic EQ thing, but in a different way. And you can kind of mix in how much you want of that. You can even add a bit of chorus, but if you put it back to mono, it completely undoes everything and you still get your original mono signal back. So this is something you can use to really create stereo wackiness, which just folds down perfectly to mono. And I was doing this with 3 or 4 plugins and some sends to groups and whatever like that, and I found all that annoying, so I just wrote a plugin to do it for me. And it's the first VST plugin I ever wrote, and really pleased with it. I'm actually using it in my own mixes. The bug that I found it the other day, which was a really stupid bug, if you're into coding, you'll understand this. It was basically shared or private memory, basically within instances. The delay buffer was using a shared bit of memory between instances of the plugin. So the moment I put 2 on, I was hearing it was acoustic guitar and overheads, and I was hearing them on each other's plugins, and it just sounded bloody awful. And I realised what I'd done immediately. I was like, oh, they're sharing some memory. So I went back to the code and basically made that so that it was, the memory was allocated per instance, which was just a stupid thing. I'd never checked it with multiple instances. So lesson learnt there, hand slap, and I fixed the code for that, and I've updated it on the GitHub. So if you downloaded that code and compiled it, if you're one of the 2 people that probably did that, then do it again, update it, because I fixed that problem. But very useful plugin. I'm really pleased I wrote that, because it's very useful and I am actually using it. The other one as well, it's a free plugin, which is Vocal Doubler. Wow, I've been going an hour and a half. I'm sorry, this is going to be a long video. Saying that, my last really long video, which was the mic tier video, did really well. So maybe you like long videos where I'm rambling and not. Why is it that people want to watch videos where people are talking about audio rather than actually doing the audio? The ones where I do the audio tend to get less views than the ones where I just talk about doing audio. Maybe it's because you're like me and you put on videos at night and you like to hear people talk about a plugin or a mixing desk or whatever, and then the moment the audio examples come in and I'm falling asleep, it then wakes me up. I'm like, for fuck's sake, stop putting audio in your audio videos. So maybe I've got one of those voices that sends you to sleep and you just, like watching me talk, but without audio examples, because that might wake you up. Let me know whether that's true or not, because sidetrack here, I'll come back to the vocal doubler in a second. I had my YouTube roundup of the year, which I'm sure some of you will have got, and apparently the most watched channel of the year for me is Dan Worrell, okay, and his videos are excellent. I've previously called him God, and he definitely is in the audio kind of YouTuber world. But part of the reason that I've watched all of his videos this year is because his voice is really good to sleep to. So I quite often put on a playlist of his videos just to go to sleep to, and his music as well, when it comes in, doesn't just kind of wake you up. It's kind of quite restful and enjoyable. I do quite like some of his music, but yeah, I use him to sleep to. So he was my most watched channel apparently of the last year, which I found quite funny. So thank you, Dan, for having a very restful voice that I sleep to. But I wonder whether any of you are doing the same with me, which is why long videos where I talk a lot sometimes do better than ones where I'm actually doing the thing that I'm talking about. So you tell me. Anyway, it's a sidetrack. Thank you for staying with me on this video. If you're still here, keep watching, because I've got some really good stuff coming up. I've got confessions, I've got all sorts of stuff. This might be 2 hours long by the time I've finished it. Right, so Vocal Doubler. I use this. It's free. It's great. I'll whack it over a backing vocal bus or something like that. Turn the amount down to, let's say, 35%, whatever. Turn up the variation a bit, and it just makes things sound bigger and like they're doubled. It's kind of like better than using a chorus, I suppose. Okay, here's one that doesn't do anything really to the audio other than capture it and send it somewhere else. It's the Wave Stream plugin, and I have the Stream Send plugin, should I say, and I have used this so much in the last year, and it's really good for putting on the end of, so I will capture out of my desks back into the DAW, put this plug-in over that and send my mix to somewhere else, so I can be almost in real time doing a mix and having someone else listen and give me feedback, and they're listening to it, in the same 24-bit resolution that I'm listening. It's not like it's an MP3 and they can sit and listen through their speakers, and we can collaborate, and maybe, if we're both on headphones as well, which is another thing I want to do a video on, because I'm actually now enjoying using headphones, which is a completely different thing. But we can both be sitting there working on stuff, and I can be getting almost like real-time feedback from someone I'm doing a mix for, and it's very enjoyable. And WaveStream has been great. I'm sure there's other services that do it, but I have a Waves subscription, so I might as well use their stuff. Every now and again it crashes. Obviously it's an internet-based service, but not enough that it's annoyed me. It's worked really, really well, so shout out to that plugin. Okay, we're getting down to the stock plugins. So I use a lot of stock plugins within Cubase. Their EQ plugin Frequency I use all the time. It's got mid-side, linear phase, everything you'd want, 8 bands. I know there's other plugins that you have more bands, but 8 bands is more than enough, pretty much what I want to do. And if I really need to dial in details and get really surgical, I have dynamic EQ, or I want changeable slopes for my high and low pass filters. I want to do whatever wacky stuff that you might want to do. Side chaining this to that, whatever. The Cubase Frequency plugin I use all the time and I absolutely love it. I use their stock mono delay as well. If I just want a really clean, just delay, let's say I'm doing a repeat of something, or let's say I'm doing that kind of stereo trick that I actually wrote my Mono2Stereo plugin for. But before I had my own plugin and I needed like a 15 millisecond delay to do the comb filtering thing, I was using the... This video is going on so long that my hard drive that I've got plugged into my camera ran out, so that's like 200 gigabytes I'm never going to get back. Another plugin I use is the Reverbs plugin for impulse response. I showed you that one earlier. The Cubase Black Valve plugin is nice as a compressor. I've used that a fair amount. I really enjoy that one. I use their built-in phasers and chorus. They've got kind of a standard chorus, then they've got the studio chorus, which has got other options on it, and I like their phaser. That's pretty good. I use the stock compressor quite a bit, particularly for sidechain stuff where, let's say I just want to duck a signal based on something else and I want a clean compressor. I use their stock compressor as well as their stock multiband compressor for the same reason. If I just want to duck the bottom end of a bass every time the kick drum goes in, standard sidechain stuff, I will use either the clean, stock compressor or the multiband compressor. I really like those built-in Cubase plugins. Now I'm going to get to the stuff that's more what I've given up on. And some of this is because I don't think it's very good. And some of it is because I've just got no need for it anymore and they're really good plugins. So I'm just going to sum up all SSL channel strip plugins with the exception of that IK British channel, which I'm still using from time to time. But I used to use the Waves SSL plugins. I've also got the Brainworks SSL plugins. I used to use the CLA Mix Hub, the EV2. I've tried all of those and I've got all of them. And you know what? I haven't touched them probably for a year and a half now. I've not really touched them for anything that I've done an actual real mix. Maybe I've used them in a demo for something, but no, I don't use them anymore because I kind of reprint stuff through Real Stuff and then I bring it up on the desks here and I just don't feel any... I mean, it's not that I've consciously said I don't want to use them. It's just I've not needed to. So all those kind of SSL channel strip plugins that I used to use all the time, I just don't use anymore. Maybe as well because the Softube plugin is kind of handling all of that, and it's handling all of that way more than any of those SSL plugins that I used to use would do. And the only reason I use the IK one from time to time is just because it's so accurate with the EQ to my outboard. So let's say I'm bringing the snare drum through there and I've got something, and then there's a bit in the song where I want to do something wacky with the snare drum and I need to recreate similar settings to what I've got outside, but in software, I can use that IK plugin and get it straight away. So with the exception of that, I've completely given up on all of those SSL type plugins. And I've also given up on, I've also stopped using, and I think that's a good thing, I've stopped using, in the old days, I used to use like the CLA 76 as my standard 1176 plugin because I had it. And the IK one's just so much better, and the UAD ones, fuck you UAD, but the UAD ones sound a lot better. So I haven't used the CLA 76 in probably 2 years. I've not put it on anything new. There are old mixes I open up that have got it on there, and I'll either replace it, or if it sounds all right, I'll leave it. But I just don't really use that plugin anymore. And I just don't think it's that good. I think it was good for its time when it came out, but it's just you know, it's kind of been overtaken by lots of other plugins now. So I rarely use that, if at all. I mean, I haven't touched it in 2 years, I don't think. UAD Pure Plate, used to use that all the time. As I said, I've moved on from that. I'm using that IK Flame Studio Reverb, the plate in that now. So I've given up on the UAD Pure Plate. It's not that it's a bad plugin, it's just I need an EQ each side and a saturator to do what the IK one does in one plugin. So I've stopped using that. I've stopped using, and I might go back to every now and again, but I've stopped using the Waves H Delay plugin because the Delay Lab did what I wanted to do so much better out of the box. But there's a couple of times where I've loaded up old sessions that had the H Delay on, and actually I've not been able to get the same sound as the H Delay out of the Delay Lab. So it's one of those things, when I open up an old session, I do like the H Delay more than I remember liking it. And I think, I can't really replace that. That just works there. So I'm not ruling out the H Delay being used in the future, but I certainly haven't used it or put it on a new session for a good year now. I would say I've almost given up on that one. Waves NLS plugin. Now, there are times where I still use this a little bit, but I used to use that a lot. Going back a few years, I used to use the Waves NLS plugin a lot because it would give you all those inter-channel differences apparently and saturate like an SSL or a Neve or the EMI consoles. And actually, I thought it did a fair job on that, and I got some sounds out of the Waves NLS plugin that I really, really liked. But now I've got all this analog saturation with all my stuff, and I'm reprinting everything through Real Gear, and you just kind of get buckets of saturation thrown in for free. I don't need to add extra saturation to stuff with my current workflow. So the NLS has almost completely not been used. The only time that I've used it really is on a guitar sound that I wanted to get a particularly sort of spiky, nasty extra bit of saturation on top of the guitar sound. I wanted to get a guitar sound that was very similar to It Could Be You by Blur. And that to me just sounds like they've got the SSL desk and they've really clipped it. And whacking on the Waves NLS and turning it up beyond what I would usually use it actually got me the guitar sound I was looking for. So that's the only time in the last year I've used it. And I doubt I'll be using it much in the next year or so, but who knows. But yeah, so that's in my almost given up on list. Not that it's a bad plugin. Here are some ones that I don't like, that I've tried to use, but I've given up on. So I liked all those other smart plugins that I mentioned earlier, but Smart Comp 2, I know they've got a Smart Comp 3 out now, but I'm kind of put off from Smart Comp 3 by the fact that I don't really like Smart Comp 2. And it's not that Smart Comp 2 is bad. I don't like the fact that whenever you kind of say, yeah, I want it to compress this drum kit or compress this acoustic guitar or compress this vocal, it will immediately default to using the spectral compressor, not the normal standard sort of, full band compression. And then the spectral compression always, again, it's like, oh, that sounds nice. And then you put it in the mix and it sucked all the life out of it. And then it just doesn't feel intuitive to use. It's kind of like a wannabe Pro C2, I think, without, I don't know, I don't like the fact that you've got to let it learn something before I can start dialing in my settings. And I've really wanted to like Smart Comp 2, and I have used it mostly in DaVinci Resolve for voiceover mic type stuff. That's where it shines for me, but I've pretty much given up on it, I'll be honest with you. I think for what I'd want to use it for, I'm actually using the Silk Vocal more, the Wave Silk Vocal. And I don't know, I just don't particularly like Smart Comp 2. I've just not got on with it. Tell me your feelings. Am I doing something wrong? But so that's a plugin I've pretty much given up on now, not because of a workflow change, but just because I don't think it's very good. Talking of those kind of resonance suppressing type things, Waves IDX, I've really wanted to like that plugin. I look at it and think, oh, that must do so much, and all the marketing blurb says it's going to just revolutionize the sound of whatever I put through it. And I've only ever once used it and it given me a positive. Every other time I think this is one of those situations where Waves IDX should actually solve my problem, and I put it on and it's shit. it doesn't solve it at all. And it's like, no, that didn't work. And after 10 times of kind of, you know, loading up the plugin and going, oh, hopefully this is going to do X, Y, Z, and then it doesn't, and you go, oh, and then unload it. And after you've done that 10 times, you kind of, the next time you think, maybe I won't try that plugin because it's probably not going to work. And I don't really understand what it's meant to be doing that's good, because it just doesn't sound good to me. I'm not even going to talk about that one that they've got that tries to do EQ matching. Is it the AQ plugin or that was just awful. That really was just absolutely awful. I've never heard a worse kind of auto EQ sort of, hey, we'll do it all for you and you don't have to worry about it sort of plugin. It was just awful. So I've not even tried that with any anger to even include it too much in this list. But IDX I have actually tried, and it's pretty bad. I've not enjoyed it at all. Whereas the Waves Curves Equator plugin I've actually used with some success, but not in the last year, so I didn't include it in this list. But a lot of that new stuff by Waves, not overly impressed with some of that. And talking about Waves plugins that I'm not impressed with, the L2 was a classic. I'm sure we've all used the Waves L2 at some point. And if you want to sound like you're a 90s indie band, you know, or early noughties indie band, whack the L2 over the end of your mix and, you know, pull the knob down and it just gives you that instant sound. Whether that's good or not is for you to decide, but it definitely had a sound, and it's kind of a classic limiter in that respect. So when they brought out the L4, I thought, oh, I've got to give this a try, and I get it with my subscription, obviously. So I put it on something, and it was awful. It really was just fucking awful. So I have no idea what they were thinking of or why. I don't know. It just sounds worse than the L2. It's worse than the L1. The L3 I've used a couple of times, but I didn't really get on with that. And in this day and age, when you've got, like, you know, Smart Limit, and I talked about Stealth Limiter earlier by IK, and of course there's like the Pro L2 Fab Filter. I don't understand what the Waves L4 is for. You know, when you've got all these other it just was so fucking awful that I was really kind of surprised by how bad it was. So I've given up on trying that one. I tried it for all of half an hour and then threw that one out. And the IK Multimedia Clipper, I used to use that, but I've just don't like the sound of it. Every time I've tried to use it, I've not liked the sound of it. So I've given up on that. The plugins, I've got a category here of things that I want to try out of curiosity. Here is an admission. I do not own any Fab Filter plugins. I have barely used, on other people's systems, I've kind of touched them a little bit, but I've barely used any Fab Filter plugins. I've watched so many Dan Worrell videos that I feel like I know Fab Filter plugins inside out, but I do not own any of them, and I've barely used them. And I really want to try the Pro Q4, for example. I really want to try that this year, because everyone talks about how much better it's going to make my workflow and how pro it is. And whenever I get myself in a situation where I think, oh, maybe I could solve this with something that Pro Q4 does, I then look what's in my tool set and find something to do the job and think, well, that's 150 quid or something that I don't have to pay out. And I always put it off. And another year has passed and I've not bought. Really what I want to buy is a pack of 4 plugins. I want the Pro Q4, I want Saturn the Saturator, I want the Pro C2, the compressor, and I want the Pro L2 as well, right? They're the ones that I'm interested in. I really want to try them out in the next year and possibly buy them, but I've not run into something where I've gone, oh, I really need that. The limiter Pro L2 interests me more because if it's better than Smart Limit and Stealth Limiter, then I can get rid of those two. I really want less plugins on my computer. I just want the ones that I use, which is why I'm kind of doing this video more for myself than for you. Another thing that I really want to try out this year, because I used to use, every now and again, I used the version 1 of it, and I was always very impressed with it. And I have used this just as a tester, not that long ago, but I've not used it in anger, and I really want to try it, is the Waves Schweppes Omnichannel 2, because everything that I hear on that just sounds great. And I do in the box mixing while I'm on tour, because I haven't got all of this stuff here, and it just seems to cover everything. So I really want to try and get my head around that. So the final thing, let me have a swig of tea. If you're still with me, thank you so much. Let me know by writing, I don't know, just pick a word and put it in the comments. Something stupid. Aardvarks. Write aardvarks in the comment if you're still with me at this point, okay? I've got guilty pleasures. Here's some plugins that I still use. I try not to use them, and then I'm just not getting the sound I'm looking for. And I know that plugin, if I put it on there, will just give me the sound I'm looking for. And I hate myself for using them, but I still love them. And the first one of which is the CLA 2A, the old classic Waves 2A plugin, which sounds nothing like any 2As that I've used in real life, and sounds nothing like any of the other 2A plugins that I've used. But there's something about it. It's really punchy, and certain times a parallel drum bus, or over synths as well, and over a vocal bus sometimes. The CLA 2A, for all its faults, it's not oversampled. There's a million and one things that you could say are shit about it, leaving aside all the criticisms of Waves as a company. But I find myself sometimes using outboard gear. I'm trying to get the sound of that CLA 2A plugin with this, and in the end, I kind of hide in shame for a little bit and then put the CLA 2A plugin, and it just works straight out the box. And it doesn't work on everything, but for what I want it for, sometimes in a mix, it's a guilty pleasure. I really like it for certain things. And the other two guilty pleasure plugins I'm going to mention are Waves as well. The Waves Reverb. If I want that cheap 90s kind of MIDI Verb 2 type snare reverb, and all my reverbs just sound too posh, and the Lexicon impulses are too posh, and this is too posh, and that's too posh, the Waves Reverb just sounds so cheap that it's actually nice. And I know that sounds weird, but on drums where you don't necessarily want it to sound nice, you want that kind of sort of explosive snare, a little bit 80s, a little bit cheap 90s. And the Waves Reverb plugin just can do that really, really well. I use their either their plate or their room, and they've kind of got a gated option in that, and that can sound really good. Again, not something I'd use all the time, but when I'm looking for a certain sound, that will just solve it. And I've got loads of outboard, and I much prefer using the outboard. I love my analog stuff. I love the character it imparts. I love the simple workflow, the fact that if I put that vocal through that, or I put that bass drum through that, or that guitar through that, it just gives me the sound, and I've got as little knobs as possible to just get the sound that I want. But I still do use plugins, and as I highlighted in this video, there's some that I just love and wouldn't know what to do without them. But there's others that are perfectly good that I've moved away from, and I hope I've covered all of those in this video. Let me know your favourite plugins. Let me know if there's ones in there that you think I should be hideously embarrassed about using and should replace with a better model by insert company name here. I'm sure you'll give me all your opinions in the comments. Keep it nice. In fact, I was commenting with a friend of mine the other day how lovely my comment section is. Particularly I put out that video on with the winner of my mix competition, and how people that had entered it were congratulating the winner. Everyone was so nice. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for making my comment section in 2025 one of the nicest places on YouTube to be. So thank you very much. Please subscribe, please like, please share, please comment on the video, and also press the hype button if you get that come up, because that's a new thing that helps YouTube videos. I'm almost at 11,000 subscribers, or I've passed it by the time you watch this video. So thank you to everyone who's subscribed, and Happy New Year for 2026. Or if you're watching in the future, Happy New Year for whatever year you're in, because I do not want anyone to have a bad new year, with the exception of the people at UAD who make my plugins not work on a plane because I don't have an internet connection. So fuck you, UAD. But other than you, have a great time. See you later, see you in another video, and goodbye.